Morning, everybody. Yes, it's our first TeachMeet of 2025, which is really exciting. And welcome to you all today. So hopefully you'll come away feeling really inspired after listening to the lovely Charlotte today on this topic, and some little tips as well. And if you're new to Twinkl, or perhaps you're new to the idea of tutoring or anything in between, we do have a dedicated private tutors page on Twinkl as well. And if you wanted to do a little bit more reading or some, like hear a little bit more about it, we've actually got a podcast episode with Charlotte talking about everything that she does. And you can find that either on our social media pages with our handle, Twinkl Tutors, or if you search Spill the Tea, I will pop a link in the chat as well. We've also got a wonderful blog in conversation with Charlotte, which you can find on our page, and some other useful blogs with links to resources to help make tutoring that little bit easier. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Charlotte. So Charlotte, off you go.
Thank you very much. So hello everyone, my name is Charlotte and I teach exclusively home educated students, and I have done for about 6 years now. And I'm a big advocate that this is such a fabulous world for tutors to kind of branch into and explore, and that it can be such a rewarding way to kind of dip into different sides of tutoring and explore different things. So throughout the session today, we're going to look at quite a few different bits. We're going to understand the context of home education, because I think it's something that's still a little bit misty, or kind of like there's some misconceptions about how it works or what it is. Then we're going to look at how it can be quite different to some kind of supporting mainstream students, ways that you can kind of link into it, different things that it could offer you, social media links, and then kind of best practices to support students that are home educating in your kind of tutoring company, or just as you yourself, whatever kind of works and that you can take from this that could be helpful. So to start off, understanding the context of home ed, I feel like can sometimes be a bit daunting, especially if someone's worked in mainstream for a very long time. There can sometimes be some stigma or negative associations with home education, but we're going to try and break those down and see why it can be such a wonderful kind of world for you guys to dive into, and how the reasons that students are home educated can be some really good reasons for teachers to teach home educated students as well. So some of the main reasons that I've come across for students being home educated, the top one is usually always this personalized and accommodated learning. So being able to completely change the way we teach subjects, how subjects are presented, what subjects are offered to suit that individual child's needs, which I think is a lot of things that teachers in mainstream wish that they could be able to do, but when you've got 35 kids in a class, that is so overwhelming to try and find the time and the resources to make that work. But in the tutoring world, we've got so much more flexibility and options to choose from, and even more so when it comes to home education, because it is such a vast kind of section of learning that doesn't need to be so prescribed to just exams or just kind of stereotypically academic subjects. There's so many different options that people can use. Now, that matters as well with flexible schedules. So you'll often see people online who are home educated that do world schooling, and they're traveling the world and getting all of these amazing experiences whilst also continuing their education and traveling. And I know that may be daunting for some people to think of from a work business perspective, but time zones can be flexible. If you're doing things online, there's so many different options. I know loads of tutors who will run, say, group classes online that accommodate 3 different time zones and things to get students from all around the world. So those kind of flexible schedules can be something, again, that could benefit you for a bigger audience and more people that you could support and help teach through online things as well. Another huge thing is to be able to break down barriers for learning. So I would say the majority of my students that I work with either have additional needs or specific learning difficulties, and maybe need things that it is trickier to get when you're in a group setting, but one-on-one can be provided. So scribing, lots and lots of breaks, changing things up, more physical learning, and how that can be implemented, which again is fabulous for the student, but so fabulous for the teacher as well, to have such a kind of creative way to present learning, which is so much more fun and exciting, with less stress of things like SATs or 11+ exams that are so daunting for people. And then another huge one is different educational options. So until I started working with home educated students, I did not realize how many GCSEs were on offer. I feel like in the majority of schools, we have very similar options: 3 sciences, geography, history, religious studies, some kind of social sciences maybe kind of dripped in there. But there are so many other options, which again is fabulous for students, but amazing for tutors as well. Say, for example, you were a secondary history teacher. You could come into the online world of home education and there's students learning GCSE history, but also GCSE ancient history, GCSE classical civilizations, all of these different extra bits that you could dip your toe into. Similarly, for people that teach the sciences, we've got GCSE, biology, chemistry, physics, but also human biology. We've got things like environmental management, marine science, astronomy. So there's so many other subjects that I think are so fascinating that people could find really interesting, that if you were to look through curriculums, you might find something that really inspires you and you can like explore other subjects there as well. So that can be another great thing for teachers too. And unfortunately, we do have a lot of students in the home education world who have had negative experience in mainstream, maybe influence their mental health, or maybe just not getting the accommodations that they need. And therefore, this kind of gives them that new fresh start to kind of love learning again and find out something that works for them, which can be so rewarding from a tutor perspective to give that to a student with that one-on-one support or just a new outlook, even in group work as well. So there's so many different reasons that are beneficial to students, but also really beneficial to tutors as well working in this world. So it can be so, so fabulous. Now, a lot of the nuances that comes with home education is that flexibility. So the idea that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, which may be a little daunting to begin, of thinking, right, okay, so much freedom, so much flexibility to try and make this work for different students. But it just means that you get to really get to know a student specifically and figure out what works for them. So that could be targeting things to their interest, using different styles of learning, and even just different types of education and subjects. So we've spoke a lot about the GCSE side of different options, but also extra things like book clubs, cooking clubs, art clubs, all of these different wonderful things that so many tutors have amazing skills in more niche things. I've seen people do needle felting workshops as tutors alongside their other subjects, or bakery ones, things to do with countries and continents, languages. And all of these different things that you could offer that maybe don't kind of come under an academic umbrella, but are still learning and valuable skills that families would be so grateful for. Which again kind of gives you a little bit of change of what would be seen with mainstream students, where you're maybe having to stick to a very set curriculum of things to explore, but there's so much more freedom in this sense. Now that can be really similar with deschooling or unschooling that people may have heard of, which is kind of really removing the structured approach that comes with mainstream education and being very free-flowing, exploring like a child-led way of what interests them. We see this a lot with younger students and being able to kind of explore so many different topics, which again means that tutors have so many different things to offer, which is fabulous. And I think one of the big differences when it comes to home education versus kind of mainstream tutoring is parental roles within there. Because I find, because when it comes to home education, that is their entire education. So whether you're tutoring them or providing group classes, if you're their sole maths teacher or sole sociology teacher, that is their entire education. So you often find that there'll be a lot more parental involvement, but in such a fabulous way that they're so passionate about giving you support and finding things that work for their children and really wanting to work in that collaborative approach to make it kind of like the best and most rewarding scenario for everyone involved. And now one of these things that I think is probably the biggest sell point when I always talk to people about home education and tutoring is the flexible schedules. I see so many tutors online saying they would love to not have to work in the evenings. Now, I don't have children, but I know so many tutors do have children, and some of the trickiest parts can be working around childcare and school hours or nursery hours. Now, in this case, I don't work past 5 o'clock teaching. Now, I could make that earlier, but I just like working a lot throughout the day. So I always clock off at 5 o'clock. I used to work evenings years and years ago, and now I've sworn off them. And I would say for any tutors that say, oh, I really wish I didn't have to work evenings and I could work in the daytime to work around childcare and school hours, that I always say home education, the home ed world, want tutoring in the daytime, and it makes it so flexible. Now, I think a lot of people, when I then suggest that, are a bit apprehensive or worried about it because of those kind of like misconceptions or maybe preconceived views that come along with home education. But it is such a fabulous, enriching world, and can be great for people who are wanting their evenings off with their kids or just for more flexibility and to work around different times. And it can be really, really rewarding there. So that can be a fabulous way. Oh, to the reference in the chat about working face-to-face or online, I currently do completely online and have done post-COVID, but I did used to work face-to-face, and I think there is a huge market for that as well in kind of like many areas that all have their own home education communities, which can be fabulously kind of like acquainted for you to kind of mesh into a home education community. That's what I did pre-COVID, and then kind of from word of mouth, you meet more families and kind of create this network. But just as well, online can work, kind of creating that kind of profile online that shows the different things you offer and that you can support home educated students can be just as fabulous too. And that is what I do exclusively now. Now, unfortunately, there are still a lot of challenges that come with the concept of home education. I think a lot of people may still have kind of a bit of a stigma around how it works, maybe a very like specific view of how it kind of goes through as well. That is slowly changing, and we're seeing a lot more of understanding and maybe realizations of how home ed works. And we're going to have a little look at that of like realities in there as well soon. I think especially post-COVID, now we've had so many people go into home education, it's becoming more of like a topic of interest. People are kind of seeing it for what it is a little bit more, which is great. And we'll see how that can work in reality. Unfortunately, access to education can still be tricky, especially maybe for some students that are kind of being forced into home education if there's no other options or they're not getting on with mainstream. But this again can be something that can be used in different ways. So I've seen a lot of people worry about the idea of kind of stability when it comes to working with the home ed community, but I find that it is way more stable than when I used to work with mainstream students beforehand. Because again, you are their full education that you're providing, and there's like that mutual respect of relying on each other, which works fabulously, and that you're helping them access that education. And whether that is one-to-one sessions, group sessions, webinars, all these different options that can be provided to help that access to education. And unfortunately, there are still the barriers to learning that can come, just like in mainstream, when it comes to students with special educational needs, disabilities, specific learning difficulties, or mental health struggles. But being in that one-to-one approach makes it a lot easier to accommodate those and to provide support, help people kind of push past those barriers in a way that is a lot trickier to do when, again, you've got 30, 35 kids in a big classroom to try and give everyone their needs, whereas one-to-one can make it so much easier to do, which is so fab. Now, breaking down some of those misconceptions and looking at the reality, like we mentioned, one of the big things that I think people worry about when going into the home ed community, which maybe can reinforce like some kind of negative stereotype, is this like lack of socialization. I find it insane how much socialization all of my home education community kids get. They are non-stop. Every day is a club or multiple clubs. They talk to so many different people of different ages. I would say that they socialize way more than I did back when I was at mainstream school. So that is definitely something that maybe was true decades ago, but now it is so kind of huge, the home ed community and different interactions, that it is a fabulous social place to be. and kind of more like that community of people in a local area too, to kind of build up that network. You often find that word of mouth is huge in the home ed community because people trust different individuals, recommend you to other people because you've helped their family. So that community and social aspect is massive. And then another thing is a kind of like quote unquote full education or qualifications. Now this one, again, maybe if we went a few decades back about home education, but in the modern day, the amount of options for things like GCSEs, functional skills, A-levels that people can complete online is huge. So as well as the home ed community and tutoring in that world being fabulous for people that say work in primary, and I've seen people do like forest schools and all of these really like creative things, it can also be just as valuable for people going towards Key Stage 3 or GCSE levels, which is where I teach at as well. So all of my students that I've worked with over the last 6 years have gone on to complete GCSEs or IGCSEs, basically the equivalent, but they are relevant all around the world. Or functional skills. I've had so many now that are doing their A-levels online. One's applying for university places this year. So there's still that opportunity to get a full education, qualifications, experience, and all of these different things, which means that there's so many opportunities for support in those different areas as well, which is absolutely wonderful. Now, when it comes to then being a tutor in this world, one of the biggest things is that flexible learning approach. So you can really tailor sessions to work for the student, but also for you in the way of choosing timetables that work for you, because people are free in the day, which makes things so much easier. But also what subjects you want to teach, what topics within subjects, especially if it's kind of Key Stage 3 and under. There's less pressure on following a curriculum that aligns with mainstream school, and you can choose a niche of subjects or things that appeal to the student or really appeal to you. I have lots of tutor friends that do classes for home ed students that are about philosophy or things to do with kind of previous organisms and prehistoric eras, marine science. I do lots of work for Key Stage 3 for psychology and things. So there's so many options that you guys can choose from. And the fact that it is a lot more holistic, which again is what a lot of people kind of crave to be able to give in mainstream, but there's just not enough time or resources to do so, but you can really provide that in the home ed world. Like we mentioned before, a lot of parental communication and collaboration, which works really well, I find, because it makes your job easier when you've got parents that really want to help and support and do what they can to help their children, because a lot of the time they're just really thankful that there's someone there to support them in their journey as well. Now, on the same idea of flexible, I think that word can sometimes worry people that then there's no structure and commitment, because at the end of the day, it is still a business that people want to make money from and have a livelihood and pay their bills. But I find that there is so much structure and commitment there, because again, people see this as their entire education that they're receiving. And I'll have people that were more than happy to pay terms in advance, months in advance, or to kind of book in for 3 years earlier before an exam, really structured and really committed. They're constantly seeing what they can do to help. So there is that structure there that's kind of like a safety net and comfortable, as much as tutoring can be comfortable as a self-employed individual there to help you through it as well, which is fab. Now, one thing is it can go past the sessions. Now, a lot of things then are added in externally, which I feel like tutors are used to already anyway, with being able to provide things past just the tutoring sessions. But I think it adds an extra level with home education, especially when you get to, say, GCSE level, or even just helping people for diagnoses of things, especially if you're working with individuals with additional needs. I spend a lot of time helping to write reports for access arrangements, normal way of working for people doing private exam centres for their GCSEs, reports for diagnosis of autism, ADHD, etc. So there is kind of layers that come into it that maybe previously, if you were working in the mainstream tutoring world, would be done by schools, but then kind of can fall to you as a tutor as well. And obviously, as always, it's up to you what you offer and what you're willing to provide. So if that wouldn't be something that you're comfortable with, there's no pressure there, but it is something that could kind of come up when you're working with families, especially more towards GCSE ages, of helping them kind of take that next step through the exam system as well, which isn't as scary as it seems. It's quite easy, providing reports like you would have done in schools anyway, but just a little bit different layout for the kind of private world sector instead. But again, something that can be just as rewarding to then help them achieve those goals, which is fabulous. Now, with those flexible learning approaches, one of the biggest things I would say that takes into account with home education is this kind of idea of spiky profiles. So you will have students that will be maybe fabulous at one topic, but then maybe struggle a lot more with others, which is great in the sense that maybe in mainstream they would have been kind of capped of how much they were able to learn and progress with one topic if they were really far ahead in certain things, or maybe would fall behind a bit if they were struggling. So it gives them that opportunity to be nurtured on those things they're struggling with, but also they can kind of push the boundaries of those things that they found fabulous. I've had kind of both ends of the spectrum. I've currently got students who are 10 years old, but could complete higher level GCSE maths papers, which is insane. But then other students who are maybe 14, 15 and still struggle with a lot of things. So those kind of spiky profiles are just there, kind of helping you understand that student more as you would in mainstream, but you can provide different support for those different things that they need either more support with, or you can just let them kind of fly with it and experience and go through as much new information as they can, which is so good. We can also have that additional layer, which again can occur with mainstream tutoring as well, but I think maybe is more popular in the home ed world due to a lot of home educated students having additional needs of things like adding in scribes, changing up your communication form. I have a lot of students where I will do all the scribing for sessions, especially if they're going towards GCSE age, and that's how they'll be completing their exams. Or using typing, they will instead of speaking, or writing instead of speaking. Just allowing for a little bit more flexibility of how sessions run and what you can offer to make it accessible for everyone. And we also have timeframes for exams. So again, if people are used to working with like key stage groups like it is in mainstream, it's quite different when it comes to home ed because ages kind of go out the window a little bit. A lot of home educated students will choose to start doing GCSEs earlier and then spread them out slowly. So for example, they might do their first GCSE at age 12 or 13, and then 2 or 3 GCSEs the next year, 2 or 3 the next year, and spread them out like that. So if you are working in the GCSE world, you could have students that are age 11, 12, 13 completing GCSE level work, which just provides them more flexibility to not have, 25 exams all in one go in one exam season, which is so hectic and chaotic in mainstream. So it kind of gives more options and flexibility, and is less pressure for kind of tutors as well, because there's time frames that are a little bit longer. If a student's struggling, they can extend it by another 6 months and have some more practice. We've got November sittings for exams, which means that you've got a lot more room to play with. So you can really make it tailored to the student and take the pressure off kind of deadlines for things as well. And of course, special interest is huge. So the majority of my students will have a lot of special interest that we kind of work our sessions around. I've done maths based all around penguins and English based all around kind of like Korean War and things. So again, it just makes learning more fun and exciting. It makes it easier for you guys to be able to plan things as well if you have a special interest that you can base things around. So it just kind of gives you that more flexible and enriching approach, which I think is so fabulous. Now, with the parental involvement as well, this can be a great opportunity, like we mentioned, for that community. So you're joining in the journey of this whole family and becoming part of their world for their whole education, which then also comes to a whole nother level of just that individual, watching that child grow through either like being very young or through all their teen years and being able to progress and things. So you get really kind of connected to those families, which is so heartwarming. And then be able to provide collaborations to support them in other things as well, like ed psychs, exam centres, etc., which can just be so beneficial to both parties, more experience that you can then offer for other people. And then often you'll get a good reputation for supporting people in the home ed community that can be shared in that kind of like tight-knit group, which is really, really useful in the long run. Now, I've already mentioned about time frames, and that fabulously, when a lot of people say that they wish they didn't have to work evenings, I do recommend branching into home education, tutoring as a world. But I also think there's so many options that are kind of more maybe misunderstood or unknown that you can have in your daily life when it comes to tutoring the home ed world. So for example, just before I started this session, I taught a webinar session all about mind control psychology that then went on to politics and media literacy and very bizarre mix of things. But there's things like that, like webinars, that can be used as well, which I always recommend for people for reaching a wide audience. So webinars, you can charge £3–4 for the session, and it can have up to 150 students on there. But they use the chat function, just kind of like this. So it's easier to manage, but you're getting loads of people to come to the sessions and learn about you and kind of find out that you're a good teacher and kind of branches out. Then you can have group sessions in the day, either face-to-face with a home ed community or online ones with people all around the UK or all around the world. One-to-one sessions on academic subjects, more niche kind of creative subjects. There's so many layers that you can fit into one day that makes it work for you. So if you'd rather work just one-to-one or online or face-to-face, if you like the group session, if you like the webinars, I know some tutors that exclusively just do webinars. So they'll all be through the chat of people asking questions or giving points, and they present kind of like this, which is a really popular option. And again, kind of gives you more flexibility of meeting more people in the home ed world, providing a service that is incredibly cheap for the people paying for it, but once you get past a certain number of people joining, can be very beneficial for you as a business too. So there's so many different things that you can make work, whether you want to work in the day, want to work evenings, weekends, all different kinds of tutoring. There's so many options out there. I've seen some people who exclusively just run sessions that are to do with arts and crafts, or exclusively just run sessions that are to do with drama and creative things. And that is their whole business, and they make a whole living out of it. And it's something that they love doing, and they manage to find the business because people are so keen of different options and subjects for their kids to explore, which is great to be able to have all of those different choices available. Now, one thing that can make it a little bit trickier is finding home ed students to work with, and then also how social media plays a huge part in that. So it's very lucky if you manage to find someone who is in your home ed community locally to you or something like that, and then like it domino effects to find more people. But that is few and far between. And often in the modern day, either social media or groups online are one of the biggest ways to try and find people to work with. So we're going to have a look at how this kind of can work in your favor. Now, one of the biggest things is home ed groups online. So if you were to go on Facebook and type in something like home education Leicestershire, home education Birmingham, you will find masses of groups that have been made for communities online, and some of them will accept tutors to advertise their services on certain days. Or there are also massive home ed groups that have like tens of thousands of people in there that are for all around the UK. And again, they will say 1 day a week, tutors are allowed to advertise their services, which is fabulous. And I have gained a lot of my kind of like clientele from those groups online. But the way you kind of market yourself, I find, is very different to how I would probably do it if I was working with just mainstream students. Because I feel like there's so much pressure as a self-employed person to create like a proper business and have this logo and this business mindset and show all of these specific things. But I find often that can be a bit more off-putting in the home ed community, maybe a bit more intimidating, and that showing yourself as a person is a lot more important than just showing yourself as a business. So things like sharing information about yourself, offering advice and support, talking about your own experiences, kind of really creating that more homely feel that kind of seems less intimidating and that a student would feel more comfortable with. So I find that that is the kind of best way to go about it. And whether that's sharing relatable content to do with home education and what you can offer or how it could appeal to the home ed community, or just being very open and approachable, sharing things on there, maybe not even adverts, but just things about you, and you're willing to answer questions and you're willing to give advice or share information or recommend things, communicating with people and sharing your points of view. So less businessy and more a person that they can trust to then support them. I think especially since a lot of people in the home ed community are quite skeptical or nervous around kind of institutions that are very similar to mainstream because they either had like a bad experience or they're worried that it will be just as structured or there won't be accommodations there. So showing that you are approachable, you're open, you're flexible, and you are very inclusive to so many different things can be the best way of showing it. So less business and more you as an inclusive person and what you can offer. And when it comes to inclusivity, it can be you describing things in general, or it could also be showing things like qualifications. So there are so many free places online where you can get qualifications relating to autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, getting experience working within these areas, attending TeachMeets that are on all sorts of things. I know so many wonderful charities attend TeachMeets for different disorders or conditions that may need more support. So that can be fabulous to show inclusivity there and make people feel more kind of likely to give you a chance in kind of supporting them. And from there is to understand that kind of hesitation and that people may be a bit skeptical or it may take a while to gain that good reputation. So I always find that in those kind of home education groups, it's good to be kind of breadcrumbing things in. I've heard people use that term before of, you know, replying with a recommendation to a post, sharing kind of support or acceptance of people's views or celebrating kind of achievements that people share to gain that good reputation there that you are willing to support these groups, you've got compassion and kindness, and kind of build up slowly from that advice that you may offer, recommendations, to then kind of slowly incorporate into it, to not go in all guns blazing too heavy and make people very hesitant or worried about whether people are trustworthy or not. I feel like it's a slower approach to make sure people realize that you are reputable and can be trusted to help support their family. So building that reputation, CPD and training that we've mentioned that you can find online in things to do with autism, ADHD, mental health conditions, physical illnesses that could make people realize that you are serious about supporting people with additional needs. And then what I find can be really good for building credibility is offering things for free. So samples or tasters of things. I run an online shop alongside my kind of tutoring and webinars and things where I sell resources, pre-recorded courses, and I put loads of things on there for free, just so people can get a taster of what you have to offer. So whether that is a recording of a session you've done or a resource that you've made, and that they can then try that. They see that you are trustworthy for letting them try something for free, offering more to then get more back in the future. And that could be, well, like I say, sessions that you've ran, resources that you've made, kind of recordings of any webinars, that kind of stuff, or even just offering people advice and that they can talk to you via message to get information about things, just so you kind of build up that credibility. And then kind of as it starts dripping through, then the floodgates open and you can get more and more. It does take a while to build up, like any kind of business or kind of reputation, but it's so worth it in the long run after kind of building these up for a long while, which is great. And then just kind of like summing up with best practices, providing that personal learning approach to those students is going to be what they are really craving to be able to achieve. And then also having that open communication with the families of where the students are, what they could be doing to support, how you can support them and they can support you. The freedom and creativity that you can have in a session to make it so much more niche for that student. And then just making sure that you're willing to apply those accommodations and adaptations that they may need. So do they need a scribe? Do they need more breaks? Do they need to make it so they are typing instead of speaking? Do we need to have a whole, I always call it like a 10-minute blurt at the beginning of everything they've got to get out of their brain to tell you before we dive into the work? Anything that can just be accommodating for them that makes it seem less intimidating, less like a mainstream setting if they've had negative experiences, or just more freedom-based and that they have more choice. It could be student-led of different subjects. But again, to stress that that doesn't mean that it's going to be completely free-flowing and no structure. There can be fabulous structure. I fill my whole days, 5 days a week with these students that I've been working with for years, and they go on to do their GCSEs and then A-levels, and there's stability there as well, whilst having all the joys of flexibility and different kind of experiences that you can have. So it's got the best of both worlds there, which I think is a good thing to stress from a business point of view. We need to make money, we need to be stable, but it is amazing of the flexibility that comes with it as well. which also means I find that the home ed community can be just as understanding for tutors. If we have to cancel things or rearrange, say, an illness or a doctor's appointment, or with people's children if something goes wrong, if you offer that flexibility to them, they're so understanding back to you. Whereas I know some people may have had negative experiences before with that, but there's that kind of mutual respect that we have these lives to lead and nothing's always going to go perfect. And instead kind of giving each other that grace period and that flexibility, you kind of really build those connections and relationships, which is just wonderful.